What's up, guys? So after I made that Q&A video, I noticed that there were some things that I kind of left out, and I want to delve a little bit more into. Just fix my head here. I want to talk more about my transition leading up to it. I talked a little bit in my video about how I had really bad chest dysphoria, how I didn't really know whether or not I wanted to transition, which is true, but I think it's important that I talk a little bit more about that. I think I was 19 or 20 when I started having really bad chest dysphoria. I was at a point where I had cut off my long hair that was like halfway down my back. I started dressing more masculine. I was a mask lesbian, I guess, in a sense. I got to a point where I just did not like even looking at myself in the mirror. And it didn't just happen right away. I didn't have a big chest, but I definitely wore tight sports bras to like flatten it out. And I didn't like wearing shirts that accentuated my chest. I didn't like wearing dresses because I had to wear strapless bras or push-up bras to fit into the dress because I had really small boobs. I didn't like anything that accentuated the fact that I had breasts. When I got to the point where I went to my therapist about it, I was at a point where like I didn't even want to look at myself. I didn't want to look in the mirror at my chest. I didn't look down when I was showering. I didn't want anyone touching them. I didn't want to be intimate with anyone without a shirt on because I just didn't like that they were there and they just really did not fit my body. I was in this mindset of I don't want to transition, I don't want to be a man, I just don't like my chest. But I don't want to be a guy, I just want to be a girl without boobs. I remember having this conversation with my parents and my sister because when I let them know that I was going to see a therapist for chest dysphoria, they were like, okay, so what does this mean? I remember being so adamant, like, I don't want to be a guy, I just want to be a girl without boobs. And like it made sense in my head. It's because I didn't have this innate strong desire from the moment that I knew that I was a girl that I wanted to be a boy. Majority of the trans men that I had spoke to had known their whole life that they were meant to be a guy, and I just didn't have that experience. I didn't have the childhood where I didn't feel right in a female body. I got to a point where I didn't like my chest, and I thought that that's all it was. Going into therapy was pretty challenging for me because it really forced me to open up and talk about things in my past that I didn't really want to talk about. A lot of experiences that I had that had really impacted the way that I saw myself. And I think that really had an impact on my resistance to transitioning. I just had this idea in my head that like, I didn't do that. I couldn't do that. That wasn't something that I was gonna do because I couldn't do that. And I think that that had a lot to do with my upbringing. The LGBT community just wasn't big in my upbringing, and whenever it was talked about, it wasn't always in the best light. And so I just had this really narrow mindset. Whether it was just me coming out as a lesbian, that took a really long time for me to do. Even in that sense, it wasn't I knew my whole life. It was like one day I met a girl and I was like, oh my god, I'm feeling something for this girl in a way that I've never felt before for anyone else. And I didn't really understand what it was, but it wouldn't go away. I really had to look into myself and figure out what that meant. I cared so much about how it would affect everybody else. Everyone else has to call me this new thing, and everyone else has to treat me differently, and everyone else. How is this going to impact everyone else? And I didn't let myself think about what it would do for me. My therapist was like, stop thinking about everyone else. Stop worrying about everyone else. What is going to be best for you? What is going to make you happy despite what anyone else thinks? That was really challenging for me to let go of the outside world and how everyone else was going to perceive me or treat me, to accept that I am good enough as long as I'm good enough for myself and not as long as I'm good enough for everyone else. About a month and a half, 2 months into therapy was when we finally were at a point where we were like, okay, transitioning or at least starting testosterone might be the next option. I was so scared of, what if I try this and I don't like it? Can I go back? Can it be reversed? And I wasn't quite ready to jump in for myself. I talked to my therapist about it. I talked to my primary doctor about it. I did some internet searches. I watched videos of people detransitioning. I think that was really the point where I decided, okay, I can do this. If I didn't like it, if it didn't feel right, I could go back. Starting testosterone, I still had no idea whether or not that was what I wanted to do. I wasn't severely depressed. I wasn't feeling suicidal. I wasn't at a breaking point. I was just very lost. Going to this point where I was like, I'm going to start this whole new adventure, and I don't even know if this is what I want. It was really hard for me to allow myself to take those steps. My wife brought up the conversation after she watched my video, and she's like, don't forget how hard it was for you going into this. It's easy for me to forget how difficult it was to come to this point. I think it's important that I share my experience, because when I was in therapy talking about transitioning, most of the people that I heard their experiences were, I knew since I was a little kid, my friends knew, my family knew, and I didn't have that same experience. It was really hard for me going into it and not having anyone to relate to. And I think it's important that I share my experience for me to be able to relate and know that there are other people who didn't know. And so I want to share my story, and I want to give some people some insight and some light. If you or someone you know is at the same point, let them know that it's okay to not know. It's okay to be unsure, and it's okay to talk about it. So that's what I got for this video. In my introduction video, I said I wanted to be very open and honest about my experience and my story. So that's what I'm trying to do here, and I want to make sure that everyone gets a full picture of what I've gone through to get to this point. And I'll see you next time.